Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is a prep coach and professional natural bodybuilder. Today's guest is Cliff Wilson. Cliff, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure, man. So excited to chop it up with you. I just kind of want to ask you a couple of quick questions, Cliff, just that I like to ask all my guests just to kind of get the conversational ball rolling, so to speak. The first question I've got for you: who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
Well, I mean, when I first picked up a magazine, one of the first guys that I saw on the cover was Ronnie Coleman. I mean, it's a pretty, and everybody's answer is always Ronnie Coleman, but that was one of my first, I looked at this guy, I was like, damn, I can't believe how big this guy is, you know? So some of my favorites, I like Ronnie Coleman, Mike Menser, Frank Zane, and Lee Haney. Those are probably some of my favorite on the enhanced side. On the natural side, I like Valentine Azuga, Doug Miller. Those are a couple of my favorite natural competitors.
Cool. Excellent, man. I got to ask you, Mike Menser, I don't know if he's ever come up in the 150, 60 some episodes I've done of this. I've found him to be a very fascinating individual on multiple levels, but why Mike Menser for you? Was it just a physique thing? Was it kind of more of a intellectual thing? Both? Why him for you?
I do like his physique. But I do like that, even if I don't always, I say this sometimes about people, even if I don't always agree with his conclusions on things, I like the way that he thought on things. I have a few of his books, and, some of them were even less about bodybuilding than other issues. And it definitely appealed to me. And it's definitely, one thing I liked is that early on in my career, when I found him, is it gave me a little bit of a license, if that makes sense, to approach things from less than a purely physical standpoint. If that makes sense.
1000%. I love that. All right. So at what age did you start lifting weights, Cliff? And then why did you start lifting weights kind of at that specific age?
I was 19 years old. I played basketball in college, and when I went to, it was Division I, and when I went there, I was 6'1", which is kind of short for basketball anyway. And then they weighed me in, and I was 156 pounds, and they're like, "We got to put some meat on your bones." So I started lifting with the staff there, and I never really looked back.
Perfect. Love it. All right. So I like to use that question just to kind of transition to my guest's backstory a little bit. It's always kind of fun to kind of find out, where somebody came from and how they got to where they're at today. So talk to us a little bit about where you grew up, talk about your childhood a little bit, maybe, your parents' influence, any coaches, any teachers that maybe had a positive influence on you. What were you like as a student? You said you played college basketball. So obviously I'm assuming basketball is a big part of your life when you're younger. What other sports did you play? Paint that picture a little bit up to about high school. And then I've got some other questions that transition into post-high school for you.
Yeah. So at the earliest age I can remember, I picked up a basketball. I was obsessed with basketball. And it dominated a large part of my life. Growing up, I grew up, I moved around a lot within a few areas. I lived in Georgia for a time, but largely in the Indiana, Chicagoland area. I believe by the time I was about 18 years old, I had lived in about 15 or 16 different houses. My parents were divorced at a pretty young age. And my dad lived in Georgia, and my mom moved us back up here. So it was largely just me and my brother and my mom. And, early on, it was largely just basketball. Childhood was good in those early years. And I had very supportive parents in terms of, they were like, "Hey, you like basketball? Let's just go all in on it." School, I got good grades, but I never really had an interest in school. I've always say I love learning, but I hate school. I didn't like being told what I needed to learn, and I felt like I wanted to guide my own education. So I got great grades, but it was usually just, my mom was actually pretty great with me in the early years because she knew I hated school, and she knew I got burned out on it. And she always said, "If you keep your grades up, when you start to feel burned out, let me know. I'll give you a day off here and there," which was super understanding, and she knew how I was. Um, yeah, fifth grade came and I started school basketball, you know, and that started. And I was really fortunate. My dad and I have gotten super close, but you know, we didn't live together in those younger years. And I started school basketball, and I was really fortunate to have some great grade school coaches, type of grade school coaches that you couldn't, they wouldn't be allowed in these days. You know what I mean? I mean, they were, so I went to a Catholic school, and they were swearing at us all the time. And, you know, they were like, you're going to work your ass off, you know? And, I hope I have time for this story. So I was kind of a pudgy fifth grader. I loved basketball, but I liked playing it. I didn't really work that hard at that point. And I remember our first game came, and I thought I was going to be great, you know. And our first game came, and I shot 2 shots, airballed them both, because I was like, you know, I was out of shape. I was exhausted by the time the ball came to me. And the next day in practice, I'm kind of moping around. I think I was about 11 years old, and my coach pulled me aside. And my mom had always, you know, I'd been largely surrounded by women, my mom, my grandma. And my coach pulls me aside and he goes, "What the hell's wrong with you?" And I thought I was going to get like you know, it's okay, you're going to be fine. And I was like, I played bad yesterday. And he's like, well, moping around in practice isn't going to do shit about it, you know? And he's yelling at me at an 11-year-old. And he's like, and he told me that my coaches were real caring. They were like, you can be good, but you need to get out there and work your ass off. And they were like, you need to lose weight too. So I started running a lot. I got into shape, and I did become a pretty good basketball player, especially in those early years. Um, so then when high school came around, just before high school, I was still into basketball. Um, in our younger years, my mom was really good, but she did have some mental health issues. And we didn't have a lot of money at that time. And as we started to come into high school, my mom developed a pretty bad drinking problem. So the high school years were pretty tumultuous for me, and then I had 2 brothers by that point. I had to do a significant amount of the daily house stuff. A lot of times, getting my brothers ready for school, taking them to school. You know, my mom was great in my younger years, but she couldn't really get it together from that point on. So at that point, my interest in school, which was already low, was like in the basement. I was like taking care of stuff at home and basketball. I was like, that's all I'm gonna do, you know. Um, my high school coach was almost an extension of my grade school coaches. He was actually an assistant for Bobby Knight for a lot of years. So that gave you an idea of like what kind of tough guy he was. To be honest with you, when I went from fifth grade through eighth grade coaches to high school, the conditioning didn't even seem like it was an increase. You know, usually guys get on their high school team and the conditioning just seems extreme. That seemed almost identical. And then when I went to college, I was like, this conditioning is very easy. um, yeah, and you know, my coach was really good, and it kind of furthered that work ethic. And you know, through high school, like I said, I got great grades again, you know, A's and B's. But I just had zero interest in school. I was like, I'll just do enough to get my A's and B's, and didn't really have too much interest in it. And you know, after high school is kind of when I got out of I went after high school is kind of when I started to come into my own. I was able to step out of my home environment, which was very tumultuous at that time. You know, there were a couple of instances in high school where you know, if my mom wasn't doing well, I had to sleep in the park. You know, I had to sleep outside, and you know, it would be tough sometimes dealing with some of that stuff. So it was very interesting once I was able to get out of school. Then I was able to kind of out of the house and out of high school, I was able to kind of take some time to focus on me and find the things that I really enjoyed.
All right. So a couple of things I want to draw out of that, what you just shared, Cliff. Basketball. Do you feel like basketball, you know, especially maybe in those high school years, because like you said, it was very tumultuous for you, your family. Do you feel like basketball was a type of an escape for you? And then the second question is, maybe even answer this one before the previous one I just asked. Why basketball? Why did you have such an attraction to it? Why did you enjoy it so much? And then why don't you answer if you felt like it became kind of like that escape for you, if you don't mind?
Oh yeah. I was attracted to basketball. One, I had ability, I was good at it. I've never been the fastest or the tallest or could jump the highest, but the thing I do have is I'm very coordinated. um, and so I could shoot. The second I could pick a ball, I could shoot. I could dribble. So I was skilled at it, and I think it was a sport that really allowed me to use my mind as well, picking my spots, developing certain moves. And so I think that was what the attraction was to it in the early going. And it absolutely became an escape. I mean, it definitely got me through high school in some tough years. There would be there was a lot of times where, like I said, you'd get no sleep because of a wild night at home. And then, you'd go to school the next day, pretty much. I slept in a lot of classes too. I would still get the A's. I would usually sleep through the classes. I'd read the book on my own, get an A or a B. But then practice came, and it was like my time. Because I knew then once I got home from practice, I was probably gonna have to deal with some stuff. And so it was my time to be able to escape and do something that I loved and enjoyed, which were few and far between in those years.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. So kind of the last question, and then we'll transition to college here. So like all of us, have different experiences in life, and, we all have different issues and go through different things. Now, at some point in your life, especially from childhood, if you have some tough situations, a lot of people never recover from that. A lot of people have, lifelong issues. I'll just kind of keep it a blanket statement at that. Was there a point in your life where you kind of had to do some hard work on yourself, maybe some inner work to kind of like work through some of those struggles that you had during childhood, or some of those traumatic experiences? And if so, walk us through that, maybe just lightly, if you don't mind, and I'm asking this because, again, we all have struggles. We all have issues. Like, this is the part of the podcast that really, more so than the bodybuilding talk, can really touch people, because it's like, hey, like, I went through that. Or, somebody's like, well, I didn't necessarily go through that, but maybe, I've got a friend that's going through that right now, and people can relate. So if you want to touch on that for a minute, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I at an early age, I never told anybody about what was going on at home. None of my classmates knew. Not even my grandma, my aunts really knew. I kept it a secret. I was keeping the household in order, so that nobody really knew. One of the things that I noticed around the time that started, I guess I had noticed it before, is that a lot of times when people came from bad situations, people didn't expect a lot of them. And I remember freshman year of high school, when things really started to get bad, I was like, that's not going to be me. You know what I mean? I even at that young age, I would sometimes tell my brother, I was like, when I'm an adult, I want people to say that I accomplished something in spite of this, not that I didn't accomplish something because of this. So honestly, nobody really knew that there were issues until maybe my senior year of high school or just after. Even my dad didn't know. He was living in Georgia, and I kept it a secret from him too. I was like determined to just keep everything together. Um, I didn't really view it. It's interesting. Um, I think that some people in my family have had a harder time getting over some of those years than myself. It's interesting. I didn't really view it as traumatic. It was just what had to be done, if that makes sense. But I believe it had lingering impacts on me, and that the impact being that I don't think I'm quick to trust people. Um, and I usually, it's taken me a lot of years to learn to ask for help when I need it. Because it was usually I'll get it all done myself. And my fiance has been great with that. She's one of the first people that's like, hey, you have to ask for help, when you need it. And I'm like, you're right. And so it's been one of the lingering effects, is that sometimes I have this I'll do it all myself mentality, and I don't need anybody's help to do it.
Cool. Appreciate you touching that for a second. So let's transition. So you said earlier that you played college basketball, Division I. So why don't you talk about that experience going from high school going into college? You said earlier that's kind of when you feel like you kind of maybe stepped into your own self a bit. So talk about your college basketball experience. Talk about college experience kind of overall. What did you study? And just touch on that, and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah, yeah. So when I went to, so I should back up and say one thing. In high school, the only person that ended up knowing something was my high school basketball coach. My mom got arrested one time, and it was in the newspaper, and and he read it, and he was the only one that like pulled me aside. And he pretty much asked me, "Do you need anything? Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm fine." And then we never spoke about it again. So then when I went to college, um, I I didn't enjoy that either. It's kind of funny. It tasted. I got more of a taste of total autonomy. Do you know what I mean? Living in the dorms was nice. I enjoyed the part of autonomy. I guess the thing is that I didn't enjoy still having to go to class. Learning things that I wasn't interested in learning, at least not at that time. And A lot of people like the social aspect. I'm a little bit more of a loner. I didn't enjoy being surrounded by people all the time. And so I have good friends, but I also enjoy my time at my house. And so It was interesting. I was playing basketball, and so it was Valparaiso University, and I was starting off the year with them. And realistically, I was like the last guy on the bench because I was like the shortest and the slowest, but I was there, and with me not being at home, things absolutely started to fall apart. It wasn't too far from my my house, where I'd been living, maybe an hour away. And things started to fall apart. And at that point now, everybody had kind of known what was going on. And my brothers were struggling big time. They were like having to move. And I was trying to help keep things. And eventually, about halfway through the year came, and I was really finding I wasn't able to keep it all together. My grades were still good. I made dean's list and everything. Once again, I know probably, some people probably hate hearing that I was making dean's list and I like hated school and did like the bare minimum. Um, but So things were falling apart at home, and it got to the point where I was like, I can't study and play basketball and try to keep things a little bit together with my brothers and my mom and everything. And at that point, I also was so I kind of made the decision. This was probably the point in my life where I had some bigger development, right? You named it, in that I was like using basketball. I loved basketball. I still love basketball, honestly, but it was that escape wasn't working anymore. And so about halfway through the year, I was like, I talked to my coach. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was like, I can't keep everything together. And he totally understood. And I wasn't like one of those guys that was like integral to the success of the team. Do you know what I mean? I was easily replaceable. I was a freshman and the last guy off the bench. So he, he totally understood. So I, it freed me up to start trying to help out a little bit more with things at home and focus on school. And honestly, it kind of felt like just start the next phase of my life, if I'm being honest, because basketball kind of felt like it was something that was clinging to a life that wasn't really working anymore. I finished out that year of school. During that year, I met who eventually became my wife at that time. And she came from a rough childhood upbringing, and we kind of we met each other and we were good for each other. Do you know what I mean? Like, we were people that we felt like we could support each other. And I think we both felt like we had zero support through our entire lives. And so you know, I realized so I realized I was on partial scholarship, and so I still had to pay some of that money. And so after that first year at school, I was like, I'm paying a ton of money. And now that I wasn't playing basketball anymore, I had to pay the second semester even more. And I was like, and I was going for business, but that was just a generic, right? That was just a generic. I think that's what a lot of business people are. I don't really know business. And I was like, I'm paying this money and I don't like what I'm learning. I don't feel like I'm learning anything that I know I'll definitely use in a career. So me and, my girlfriend at the time, we both dropped out and we moved in together, and we were um, just kind of trying to figure out life at first. We were out on our own. We were 19 years old. I continued lifting weights. I found that I enjoyed lifting weights, and it kind of gave me that physical outlet. And I got very into bodybuilding almost immediately because I wanted to learn more. I knew that. And so the only way I knew to learn more at like 19 years old was to pick up a bodybuilding magazine. For those that are younger that are listening, a magazine is paper that you open up. And I loved seeing the competition of bodybuilders. And I was probably like 160 pounds soaking wet at that point. My who became my wife, she probably thought I was absolutely nuts. I was like, I'm going to do a bodybuilding show one day. I know that. I knew it almost instantly. So yeah, then as we went off into, I started working whatever jobs I could find because I had no college degree, but I worked for a couple of weeks at like a telemarketing thing, and I didn't like that. But then I was like, I like lifting weights. Let me try GNC, and I worked at GNC. And GNC was great. I had owners. I eventually became the manager of the GNC, and the owner would like let me read whatever I wanted to read. And it's funny, once I got out of college, suddenly I'm like, there's so much stuff I want to learn about. Because I wasn't locked into what the school was telling me to learn about, and I had so much more time now that I wasn't in school. I couldn't read enough, not just about bodybuilding, but anything. I was like picking up books on physics and history and economics, and just anything I could get my hands on, I wanted to read. So that I always say I had to leave school to actually appreciate learning.
Yeah, I got a college degree, but I don't think it was worth a whole lot. And I can absolutely second what you just said. It's like, man, it's the older I get and I have the opportunity to read what I want to read and learn what I want to learn about and what I'm really passionate about. Like, it's like you can't get enough of it, right? So that's very cool. Now let's kind of transition then into more of your first kind of bodybuilding experiences. So you said you started lifting weights at 19. You need to put on weight for playing basketball. You're done playing basketball. You're done with college. You continue to lift weights, and you tell your girlfriend at the time, hey, like, I know I'm going to do a bodybuilding competition. Why don't you talk about how you went from lifting weights for basketball to put on weight to starting to train for bodybuilding, and then lead us into maybe that first competition? Did you have a coach? Kind of just the normal, typical questions maybe you get on a podcast about those initial bodybuilding experiences.
Yeah. So I knew probably within the first few months I wanted to do a bodybuilding show. I didn't, think it would lead me to here. I was just like, this looks competitive, and I like competition, and it sounded great to me. And so, I was reading the stuff in the magazines at the time, and I didn't know the accuracy of the information. Some of it sounded a little meathead to me. Do you know what I mean? And I always say I'm kind of a cross between a meathead and a nerd. And I wasn't terribly proficient. The internet was still like, it wasn't exactly in its infancy, but it wasn't nearly as mainstream like as it is now. And so, this is 2004, 2005. And so I'll say my wife at that time, she would do me a favor. So she would go online, and I would tell her some stuff that I was interested in, and she would print me off studies, whatever, she can find anything, studies, peer-reviewed papers on anything, nutrition, training, metabolism, hormones, whatever. And this is one more thing that's kind of funny. When I was really poor, we were really poor in those early days. I mean, we lived in a studio apartment. Our apartment didn't have a washer and dryer, so we had to go to this laundromat. And there was a Pizza Hut buffet there, and I would do the laundry, and I'd sit at the Pizza Hut buffet while it was going, and I would just read. I mean, I did that probably for a couple of years, and I would read for hours. I would stay even after the laundry was done, and I'd just slowly eat some pizza, read. And I always tell people I probably learned more in that Pizza Hut than I ever did anywhere else. And so I kind of started blending what I saw people doing in the magazines with what I was reading in, and I tried all kinds of stuff, but what I was reading in the studies and the papers, and it was a real, non-linear process of learning because I didn't always understand what I was reading because I didn't have that degree, but I was determined. And then I got better at using, going online and finding the things I wanted to find. So when I didn't understand a word, I'd go look it up. And I'd go find out more about it and lead me down a lot of rabbit holes. So at that time, I didn't realize that a lot of people were online, like discussing bodybuilding. They were using like the forums. It sounds so ridiculous to say, but I wasn't even aware that there was much going on in those forums. And I didn't have, I'm not like this, I'm not like a shy person, but I'm not this person that's always looking for social interaction. So I thought it was just people in there talking, which didn't really interest me. And so I kind of did my own thing going into that first show. I didn't know what to expect. I did it was called the Mid America Pro Am in 2008, and it was an INBF natural show, and I just did the novice division, and I took second. I got pretty lean. There was second out of 8 guys, and I was like the smallest one, but I was very lean, and I was hooked after that. I was like, man, this is great. And I was like, I'm not really built for this sport. I mean, I definitely look more like a basketball player or a runner or something, but I was like, I can get lean. And even as I was prepping, at that time, a lot of people were like, wow, some of the stuff you're doing is actually different than what a lot of people are doing. And then that's kind of how, at least locally, I started to like get a little bit of a name, the stuff that I was doing different stuff, and I was able to still place well and do well.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. What was it about bodybuilding that, I mean, going from basketball, and I played a year of college football, and you see a lot of athletes transition when they're done playing their sport, whether it's high school or college, more college, they transition into more, they find the gym, or they kind of transition into the gym life because they had to lift for sports, right? Powerlifting, bodybuilding, now there's CrossFit. But for you, Cliff, what was the attraction, or what really sucked you in, I'll say, in terms of this bodybuilding thing? Going from a basketball player to bodybuilding is pretty extreme. You see a lot of football players that maybe get into bodybuilding, but what was it that really sucked you in, that pulled you in to bodybuilding?
Yeah, man, what didn't? It was everything about it. I enjoyed, sometimes it was frustrating when your teammates didn't want to work as hard as you.
Yeah.
So here was a sport that you could just do it all on your own. Another thing is that there aren't many sports you can play in adulthood. So that was another thing. And then I loved testing yourself, not just in the gym, but with the diet. Of course, nobody likes to be hungry, but it is fun to test yourself and see what you're capable of. I like physique development is artistic a little bit in nature. I enjoy that aspect, and it's very science heavy. So, and I enjoy science, and so it was like all of the things that I love rolled into one package. And it was like I picked up this bodybuilding magazine, and it was like, here you go, you're gonna love this, and so it was fantastic. I mean, it really scratched every itch that I had. And I had not considered making any sort of living from bodybuilding until I did my first show. I did my first show, and I was like, man, this is good. I like it. And then as also I had people asking, as I started to get, help a few people locally, then it was like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah. All right. I ask this question sometimes to people, and I'm going to ask you because I think you'll have a great answer. Do you feel like bodybuilding chooses people, or people choose bodybuilding?
That is a good question. I think it's a little bit of both, depending on the situation. I have found that a lot of people find the sport in an unhealthy manner. What I mean by that is they need it. Um, and I wouldn't even say that I'm terribly different. You know, I was, basketball was over. I was transitioning into a new phase of life where I didn't have to look over other people. And here was this thing that I could make that was just all mine. Um, but then here's the thing is like, I think a lot of people, the question becomes, can you transition it from something that was maybe not so healthy in the beginning? Because I think having an escape works for a time, like with basketball for me. But eventually it becomes unhealthy because you're not dealing with the stuff that's going on outside of that escape. So I think with bodybuilding, I think a lot of times first bodybuilding chooses you, right? Because you're trying to escape something or a lot of people find it because they're not happy with themselves. They don't like the way they look. They don't like themselves for one reason or another. And so it's like, if I'll build these muscles and I'll be someone I like. So first bodybuilding chooses you, but then you have to choose bodybuilding by turning it into something that is healthy, find that self-acceptance, um, use the strength that you get from testing yourself in this sport to then deal with the stuff that you're maybe trying to escape from. So I think it's one way at the beginning, and then at some point there's a point where you have to turn and you choose bodybuilding for what it is.
Excellent. Excellent, man. Okay. Now I want to kind of continue a little bit further in terms of your competing. And then I want to finish the conversation today with kind of more of the coaching business type stuff. Okay. So now, like I told you before before we turned on the mic, you're the first, like lifetime drug-free athlete that I've had on here. Okay. And, I wanted to have you on here because, you understand the enhanced side because you coach enhanced athletes, but then, you also coach drug-free athletes. You're a lifetime drug-free bodybuilder, professional bodybuilder yourself. Now, the question that I have is, why did you choose to remain drug-free for the entirety of your bodybuilding career?
Yeah. So I, like, as you said, I am natural. I coach naturals and enhanced. And so sometimes people ask me like, why? Because a lot of times people stick with one arena or the other. And I'm like, I just love the sport, whatever route. And ultimately whatever somebody wants to do, that I'm all for them. Honestly, I think every competitor has to have that question that ask themselves that question. Am I gonna stay natural and go enhanced? Um, you know, for me, it wasn't some moral thing or honestly even a health thing. It was I'm not very big. I realize that even for a natural bodybuilder, I'm not a big guy. Um, but I was like, conditioning is a bit more valued in the natural side, and it is the thing that I do best. um, so it made logistical sense in the early going. Stay where what I do best is most valued. Um, and I even with drugs, there would have been a limit to how much I would have been able to add. And it was always kind of the thing of, if this changes, it would always be there. Do you know what I mean? And I've had a few health issues the last few years, so I don't know if I'll be competing anytime soon. But I had always had the plan of essentially remain natural until I hit what is usually the natural peak of someone's career, 42 years old, something like that, maybe 45. And right about the time I was going to maybe dip, I'd probably just planned on going on like hormone replacement therapy or low dose something, and then compete in the Masters NPC and kind of extend my career in that way. That was always my plan. And so it was just kind of, what I do best is most valued here. And so I should probably stay here for the time being.
Perfect. Perfect. Makes sense. Okay. Now, just kind of like, I know you've competed quite a bit over the years. Why don't you just talk to us a little bit about maybe, a few of the highlight shows, like when did you turn pro? Some of the shows that maybe, maybe you didn't win, but you just felt like you brought your best package, you most condition. So when did you turn pro, and then some of your highlight competing, and then we'll transition to coaching.
Yeah, yeah. So first show was 2008. I had a show season in 2010. I didn't do well as my first foray into the open, and like I said, I was just small, and so I took last at that show in 2011. I did a couple of shows in 2013. I had some good placings, second place, here and there, fifth place, not so great, but I wasn't happy with the look that I brought, and so I changed some things with what I was doing in 2013, and I after that, and I changed my mentality about how I was going to approach things. So 2016, I was like, I'm going all out. And I was realistic with myself. I know that I'm not the big guy. I'm not a big guy even for natural bodybuilding. And so I wanted to choose a pro qualifier, natural pro qualifier that I thought would be moderate sized. Because I realized if I had any chance of turning pro, I was probably going to need a moderate size show. But I definitely brought a drastically different package in 2016 from what I had done 3 years earlier. And so I chose the show in Florida. I was like, history says this is going to be a more moderate size pro qualifier where I might have a chance at, turning pro. And me and my dad went down there, and I show up. It was not moderate sized. It was there was a lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight class, about 10 guys in each class. So about 30 guys in the open for a natural show, which is pretty sizable, and 30 guys. And I go and weigh in, and I weighed in at like 167 at 6'1", which is so light, and then this guy next to me, my exact height, weighs in at like 210. And I'm like, oh man, I'm not gonna, so I was in the middleweight, and prejudging comes out, and I knew I had it. I was pretty good. And I take a peek at the big guy in heavyweights, and you have to win the overall to get it. And and I'm like, man, I'm not gonna beat that guy at all. I was like, but I was gonna win my first class, which I was excited about anyway. So after prejudging, I tell my friend who came, and he's a coach too, and I said, I'm gonna get the middleweights. And he goes, yeah, and he goes, you're not gonna beat that big guy. And I was like, no, I know. I was like, I'm just gonna go out there, enjoy my first overall, and have a good time. So I walk out there for the overall. I was texting clients. I had a lot of clients competing. I was texting clients, dealing with their stuff. Put my phone down, walk out for the overall, and you can see I've got a smile on my face. So I'm just happy to be there. And we all hit our front standing relax. And I hear my friend yell out from the audience. He goes, holy shit, you're in this. So you can actually see in the video, like I readjust my face, and now I'm all business. And, he was way bigger, but it was one of those situations where he was big. But he was so big that you could see a lot of striations. But he definitely didn't have like paper thin skin, which I absolutely did. And he wasn't out of shape, but I think I was so lean that standing next to me, he looked out of shape. And so I got the overall win, and that was that was where I got my pro card. And I was going to do more shows that year, but I was like, I'm going to go out on this very high note and end it there. And then 2018 was my last round of shows. I did my first pro show. I took second at my pro show, my pro debut, and I was the only one that showed up at the second show, which was so frustrating. So yeah, that's kind of my competitive history there.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask you a question. I told you if we kind of got into it, we would, but I just recently ordered your one of your books here, the Bodybuilding Complete Contest Preparation Handbook. I see it back there over your right shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
on your desk. But so something I just want to bring up, and then we'll get into the coaching aspect to end it, like I said a minute ago here. So in this book, because I'm a drug-free athlete myself, so I was attracted to this because of you. And reading through there's a section where it talks about the length of time that somebody should actually take off in between competitions. And this book is for natural athletes, enhanced athletes. You guys do a great job of kind of making that clear. But I was really surprised, not necessarily the length of time that you guys suggested to take off for a drug-free or natural athlete, but even for the enhanced, it's like, man, I think it's like, I don't know, 16 to 18 months, something like that. You can correct me what the exact number is, but I was really surprised, like in between competitions, because like I follow, NPC, I follow IFBB. That's what everybody that comes on this podcast, that's where they compete, because that's just what I like a little bit better. But you see a lot of these guys, man, they get done with one show, and ladies, they get done with the show and they're competing again. They might take 6 months off and they're competing again. So what I kind of want you to expound a little bit more on, from your perspective in terms of enhanced and drug-free, why is it so valuable and important to take that extended period of time off in between competition seasons?
Yeah, yeah. Enhanced. So one thing I'll say is enhanced. People can diet and still grow because of the compounds they're taking. But I do think that that's one thing on the enhanced side that sometimes um, people need to learn to do show seasons and then maybe sit out a season. When I say season, because you get some of these people where they do one show, one show, one show each year, but you do that, you're just dieting constantly. Um, and so, what if you did 2 to 3 shows, year off, 2 to 3 shows, year off? If you do that, you're doubling, even more, maybe your growth time. And so I think that, but I also think it depends. These guys that are competing at the Olympia, they're in the thick of it. Maybe taking years off here and there isn't always a good thing. One thing I always say something is that I always grab people's a lot of times I'll grab clients what I call their priority list. And I ask them what is a priority list, because like it's good for business usually if you have a business related to the sport to be competing all the time. So what are we prioritizing? We're prioritizing physique progress because you're going to make the most progress when you're not dieting. Simple as that. Or are we prioritizing business, and how much do you want to prioritize those? So I think each person needs to ask themselves, like, how much they're prioritizing business versus having fun, because also competing is fun. Do you want to have fun? But for people that are down to the nitty gritty of physique progress, you have to take some time off because, I mean, yeah, enhanced, you can still grow while you're dieting, but you're going to grow the most when you're not tired, when you're eating a lot of calories, you're not doing a ton of cardio. And so you can actually take the time and really make some physique improvements. And the natural side, my God, you need even more time. I mean, it is a slow process of growing muscle naturally. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but somebody that's been training more than 5, 6, maybe 7 years, a pound of muscle per year is really good. After 10 years, I mean, you're looking at maybe a half pound of muscle per year. And that's when you're not dieting. When you're dieting as a natural, you're losing muscle usually. So, especially you need longer time off there.
Now, I can't recall what is what did you guys suggest in the book, or what do you suggest, for bodybuilders to take time off? Is it, from what I recall, there is a little bit different time if you're enhanced or if you're drug-free natural. What are those specific times off in between competition seasons, Cliff?
Yeah, so I'll discount bikini because that's a little bit different because they're not getting like shredded. So, it's not as taxing to prep. I would usually recommend for an enhanced person a good 18 months. If you're really trying to grow, if you're really wanting to be aggressive, a good 18 months between show seasons. Natural bodybuilders, I would really recommend a good 2 to 3 years. Live it up when you do compete. Do 3, 4, 5 shows. I don't care, go for it. But you need time off as a natural because even when I first started, I was kind of obsessed with like learning about things that maybe weren't as readily published. And I used to do hormone panels with my clients and stuff after their shows. And it's like, when you get lean as a natural bodybuilder, I mean, your hormones are decimated. It is not, most natural male bodybuilders, when they diet for a show, by the time show day comes around, they have the testosterone of like a 70-year-old man. And it doesn't come back right away. Usually it takes about usually after a month, you're like, man, I feel so much better. But then maybe by the 3-month post show mark, you're like, okay, now I'm really starting to feel normal. And then maybe like 4 or 5 months, you're like, okay, I'm 100% back normal. So you're not really like making optimal growth progress for a good, 4 to 6 months sometimes, depending on the person. And then you can really get into the business of growing. So it's absurd timelines in the natural bodybuilding realm. And I know you didn't ask this, but one thing I always find really interesting is that a lot of times there's a lot of animosity between the natural side and the enhanced side. And it really comes from a lot of times they don't view the other one as, as dedicated as them. But it's interesting. It just comes from 2 different places, right? The natural side is like, I want this so badly. I will wait. I will work as hard and as long as I need to get it to happen, right? And the enhanced side is like, I want this so badly. I'll take some risks with my health and, really push the envelope of this. And so they both love it and they both want it. It's just different approaches, and I don't really think that, I think sometimes people get a little, um, a little aggressive to the other side. And I'm like, hey, man, we all like to lift heavy things and get up on stage in our underwear, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to say a whole lot, but I do, I guess the biggest statement I want to say is bodybuilding to me is bodybuilding. Like if you are like bodybuilding, if you're a true bodybuilder, in my estimation, it's a lifestyle, right? It's something that we're choosing to do. And whether you're enhanced, whether you're natural, drug free, however you want to word that, we bodybuilding's bodybuilding. We're all lifting weights. We're all, dieting. We're all living the life. And that's where I'll just kind of leave that. But I appreciate you sharing that there at the end. Okay, so let's transition here just a little bit into you like going from what you said, like you were poor, right, living in that studio apartment, just working different jobs, competing in your first competition, and then why don't you give us the quick notes of, or the cliff notes, no pun intended, of how you went from the studio apartment to, making a living from bodybuilding, from coaching. Just talk about that, because a lot of people out there, that's something that we want to do, or people are like pursuing to do, is to become an online coach or a prep coach. So how did that happen for you, Cliff? Just in the quick version.
Yeah. So I kind of fell into it a little bit. So I actually did so I wasn't like coaching and charging people. A lot of people they're like, hey, contact me for coaching. I was in the gym one day and I saw a guy who just clearly had genetic potential, but he was like, I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And I told my friend that was with me, I said, man, if I had that guy's genetics, I could just kill it. And he goes, all right. He goes, let's find out. And I go, and so I hadn't even done my first show yet. And he walks up to him and he goes, hey man, he goes, you should do a bodybuilding show. My friend will help you. And luckily it was a very outgoing guy. He goes, that sounds cool. He goes, what? So we just kind of became training partners at first. And I was like, I'll help you, I wasn't charging him. I was just like, and then, and so I was actually kind of coaching before I'd ever even done my first show, which was kind of crazy. And then after my first one, that guy saw another guy in the gym and he was like, this guy has great genetics too. And he was like, I'm going to do a bodybuilding show. You want to do it with me? So then I got like two guys I'm coaching just for free, wasn't charging them. And they did well. The one guy won Mr. Natural Illinois and the other guy took runner up. And around my gym, then people were like, and then I was doing things differently, right? They were drinking water. They were drinking water. My carb up approaches were a little bit more aggressive than I think some people were used to. I did very minimal cardio with them, and so it progressed pretty quickly from there. I had a few people at the gym and I was dealing with mostly like people who had never stepped on stage, right? I took these two guys at my gym who had never like competed before, and then they won Mr. Illinois. So then I had a couple other local people ask me, and then I went to a couple of shows, and then I started having people at shows ask me. I had a good group of people in the beginning. Like they knew I was new. I told them I was new. And I just said like, let's try to turn some heads here. And I want to say like 7 of the first 8 shows that I had clients in, I had an overall winner. And it blew up real fast. I mean, so I went from I'm coaching people for free, and then I was like, 40 bucks a month, whatever. You know what I mean? I was just like that. And then it got to the point where I was like, if I want to take on any more clients, I have to quit my job. And I didn't do anything special. I was so, and I've still kind of tried to remain true to this. I mean, if you look at my social media, you can probably tell I don't do a lot of marketing. I don't really do anything. I'm like, I just want to be great at this craft. And if I feel like if I'm really good at it, there's always going to be people that want great results. and they're going to want to get on board with this, and so even to this day, some of my best clients come from like referrals, because good people will usually find other good people, and it's still to this day I still get a lot of I get a ton of inquiries from all over the place, but my best clients usually come from referrals.
Okay, so you realize, hey, this thing is taking off so much. I've got to quit my job. You talked about it's more of the referral stuff because you do a great job, and then the athletes are great. They're referring and all that. Now, why don't you just because I own a gym. There's a lot of people that are going to be watching this, listening to this. They're really interested, like myself, in the business side of Cliff Wilson, right? We got the bodybuilder, we got the coaching. Now, talk to us a little bit about, if you want to use the word, maybe scaling your business, maybe some best practices in terms of a coaching business, right? Because now we see, back when you started, like, the online coaching thing, just like with social media, it's a whole different ball game now. Like I said earlier, now we've got young people that want to grow up and be a prep coach, right? Like back in the day, there wasn't really even prep coaches.
Yeah.
So, how have you been able to scale, or what have you learned about scaling a coaching business that you can maybe share with us? A couple things, best practices in terms of having a coaching business, kind of however you want to take it, in terms of just some information that we can glean from you, Cliff, in terms of having a coaching business, if you don't mind.
Yeah. I would say first and foremost, invest in your people. What I mean by that is, like, sometimes people get a client and they're like, hey, they treat them just like a client, which is okay when you have a lot of clients. But the thing is, even when you don't have a lot of clients, I still take this to heart. And when I decide to take a person on, I'm all in on you as an entire person. And I make sure they know that, because then they know I'm going to go to bat for them in every situation. I'm dedicated to figuring out what works best for them. And so first, it drives me crazy sometimes. These people, I'll sometimes have people tell me, I've got 10 clients, how do I get more? And I'm like, kill it with those clients. Like, just, go above and beyond and make sure they get the best results. If you do that, those people are going to go to bat for you. You know what I mean? If they're happy with what they're getting, and let them, and don't even be afraid to let them know, hey, I'm trying to still build here. I'm still trying to build this, because if, sometimes now I think everybody's trying to build their authority, right? You get people that have 10 clients and they're like expert in this, and I'm the, they try to pretend like they're a world's leading authority after they have 10 clients. I think that's the worst thing they could do. Let their 10 people know, hey, I am still building this, and let's build it together, get them in on building it. And I always just try to kind of let people know I'm still trying to build this up, and, let's build it together. So I would say that is first and foremost. The other thing is, social media is very interesting. One thing I see people do is they leverage their credibility for a quick dollar. You get people that have a modest following, and then suddenly they're selling everything, right? Here's these watches that I got from this. Here's a link for this. I try to be very discerning about what I ask my followers or my clients to buy. Because if I come off as somebody that's just going to slap my name on anything, it ruins my credibility. I get at least an offer or two a day for sponsorship of sell this or sell that. And some of it's even pretty good, but I'm like, hey, when I recommend something, I need it to be a home run. I think the longevity in this sport comes from your credibility. And man, people will sell that credibility in a heartbeat. And I think they hurt themselves that way. And then, and along those lines, like, once you start to actually establish your business, make sure you don't let that happen. I've said this before, but I keep, I wrote the book, and I got another one coming out, and I have some side projects that I do, but I keep my coaching core the same, because, like, as a business, there's a lot of metrics you use for what is a successful business, right? Like, and so as a business, you try to like, there's always that hunt for more income, and so it usually leads to like charging more per person or trying to take on more and more clients. And I fell into that trap several years ago. And then I was like, but if I charge too much for a bodybuilding coach, you actually price yourself out of talent. When I say talent, I don't mean just like, physical talent, but also like passionate, dedicated people. What are the odds that you're going to get somebody that can afford, a super high price point, but they're also like a really well-adjusted, hardworking person and have great physical talents. Um, and then, so you don't want to keep taking on more, so where you overextend yourself. So I've also tried to find ways to make money that are in manners that I don't corrupt my passion. That's what I say. And so like, I have like, I actually have like a side investment company where I have some real estate and stuff like that. So that way I can let that grow at a more passive rate. I mean, I'm not grinding for every dollar. So I can kind of like let that continue to go up, and I just take my bodybuilding money and I kind of shuttle some over there. So I'm not ruining my business that I've built. And I'm also allowed a little more freedom with taking on, people that I like or projects that I like, and only things that I'm passionate about. And I'm not just chasing dollars.
Excellent. Now I want to ask you with your coaching business, with your coaching business, is it just you, or do you have coaches underneath you?
It's just me. I have considered and played around with the idea. I've mentored some people over the years, and it's interesting. They've done quite well. I don't know if this is always the case, but I find the people that want a little bit more individualism. So like I'll mentor them, but they're maybe not terribly interested in coming in as a coach under me. Those people tend to do a little bit better when I say something, they really pick up on it. Like one of the problems that I've had is when I've tried to like, I've entertained the idea of taking on coaches under me, but then I'll say something like, length of prep is the most important thing. If you mess this up, you will mess up their prep. And then they're like, yeah. But what about peak week? And I'm like, that's, you're not listening. I have entertained the idea if coaches that I felt like really took to heart what I was saying, I would do that. But right now, it's been me and only me for about a good 12 years now. So, it's, I feel that way. I can just kind of keep control over the standards that I set. My clients probably get sick of it, but I'm like a real stickler for standards.
No, that's great. And I asked you that question because I had somebody, another prep coach on here just recently. I mean, just a top level guy. And I asked him, I said, is it just, because sometimes you can see, that a top level coach has coaches under them through their social media. Sometimes you can't, whatever. But what I'm trying to get at is like, I had this top level coach on, prep coach here just a week or two ago. And I asked him the same question because I didn't know. And he kind of said the same thing. Is like, for him, it's just like, it's really hard for me because he's like, I have my standards. It's really hard for me to kind of let go of the reins and like say, okay, I'm going to entrust my name and my business to this other person. Right. And I think that would be a tough thing. And for some people, I think it's easier. Some people it's not, but I think that's great though, that you guys are at least being able to just say, hey, this is kind of where we're at. Nope, there's nobody underneath us. This is why. Because there's all kinds of different ways to skin the cat, right? There's no one way or wrong way in that. So go for it.
The only person that I have helped me is my fiance. She does my assistant stuff. So like, it's kind of funny. Sometimes I'll get people that come in, that apply, and she will be their first point of contact, and she knows how I like to do things, what questions I like to ask. And so, sometimes people will be a little rude to her. And I'm like, man, you're being rude to my fiance right now. You're not going to get chosen I'm not going to work with you if you're going to be that way, and they'll be like, why is she asking me so many questions and stuff like that? She knows I'm going to ask those questions, So, and the only other person has been, my ex-wife. I'm still good friends with my ex-wife. And even sometimes she'll even throw her hat and help me if I get a little overextended or something like that. So those are the only two people that I've really trusted with putting any sort of my, handling of my business.
Yep. All right. So I want to ask you this, and we'll maybe a couple more questions, and we'll be done here, Cliff. But Now you said that you've mentored some people, you know, in the past. And it sounds like for the most part, you've been self-educated. You've kind of built this thing literally from the ground up, basically all on your own. But over the years, whether it was in the beginning, the middle, now, have you had some mentors yourself, whether it's one-on-one, like in person, or maybe just through reading material or social media? What does that look like for you? Or has it really just been Cliff Wilson the whole time?
Man, it sounds bad to say, but it's really just been me. It sounds bad to say, but you know, I find that I'm like a picker of information. Do you know what I mean? Like I I I read everything. So sometimes people tell me like, well, what should I read? Who should I read? And I'm like, everything. I personally find a lot of great value in stuff I completely disagree with as well. Because I think there's a lot of value in sometimes reading something and then trying to develop your own ways of picking that argument apart. And so, I mean, there's a lot of people whose work I respect. Don't get me wrong. I respect. I mean, you know, coaches, researchers, bodybuilders. You know, John Meadows wrote the foreword for my book. I respect the hell out of him. I still can't believe he's gone. Brad Schoenfeld is a researcher that I respect. There's just like a lot of guys that I respect, but I don't know if there's really anybody that's been a mentor. I really find that I do best when I can kind of observe everything, go into my spot, try to produce some work, and then I'll actually turn it over to people that whose opinions I respect. And then I'm like, what do you think? Yes, no, change it, don't change it. So that's kind of usually been my most effective process. And I guess that's the other thing I'll mention though is I always tell people when I've mentored a few people, I always try to tell them my most effective process may not be your most effective process. I always tell them like maybe this isn't the most effective mentoring strategy, but I'm like, here's what I'm saying. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but find a way to take this information and then integrate it into what you are and what you do.
Great. What do you within the entirety of the bodybuilding community, kind of through your lenses, Cliff, what do you feel like you wish you could maybe change, or if you could maybe speak to some of the younger viewers or listeners saying like, hey, like be cautious, be cautious of this, beware of this, like what's out there right now within the bodybuilding community? And it can be nutrition, it can be social media, it can be whatever avenue you want to take it in terms of this question. What would you like to see as a whole change within the bodybuilding world? Or what would you like to maybe just say, hey, be cautious, beware of this if you're out there listening or watching?
Yeah, definitely. I think the bodybuilding is, I always say, I've met some of the best people I have ever met in my entire life in the sport of bodybuilding, but also some of the worst people. Um, Anything that draws positions of power and something that people are passionate about are going to bring, so like bodybuilding, you're going to bring in people that they enjoy health and fitness and testing themselves and testing their work ethic and their character and things like that. And then you're just going to get pure predators, right? Narcissistic people looking to take advantage, get money. And I think people need to realize that the people that are claiming to help you, I mean, there's just so many bad coaching practices. I mean, when I say bad coaching practices, I'm not like, oh, this guy gave me too few carbs or too much cardio. I mean, like pure predator type stuff. I think people need to go into it. I mean, it happens with like politics and religion, and it's the same way in bodybuilding. People need to go into it eyes wide open with a little bit of like, this person may have my best interest at heart, but maybe not. Maybe I keep my eyes open until I, know for sure. And then along the same lines is, I wish the sports of bodybuilding, getting on stage itself, would take a little bit more of a cue from other popular sporting. Of course, bodybuilding is never going to be like as popular as football or basketball or anything, but I do think there are ways to make it more spectator friendly. Prejudging, right? Sorry, but I always say like the prejudging final system is outrageous because, like, okay, let's say I'm a fan of the Chicago Bulls, right? Say I buy tickets and I go to the game, and they're like, "Guess what, everybody? Tonight we're gonna have a skills competition. Free throw, 3-point contest, dunk contest. But we're not gonna score it. That's like how the posing routines are." And then they're like, "But this morning we played a basketball game, and after we do the skills competition, we'll let you know who won that basketball game." I think there needs to be um, prejudging, scoring, tell the audience right now who won. Um, it would get people in and out faster for that specific category. And I think that you would actually develop fans, because for people that aren't fans of the sport, it's confusing, right? They go to the night show, they watch a bunch of routines, and then all of a sudden everybody's getting awards. And you're like, this guy's routine count towards that? So I don't think that the sport of bodybuilding does a good job of developing spectators.
No, I love that, man. Some of the natural competitions I've competed in, that's how they run it. It's like you come in, you have the prejudging, you go through your comparisons, all that different stuff. You have your routine, and then they tell you who won, and then they move on to bikini or whatever. And I love it.
So, kind of funny story behind that. Natural bodybuilding didn't used to do that. And in 2012, I made essentially that story I just told you. I made a Facebook post and I tagged all the Natural Bodybuilding Federation heads in it. And man, I got a lot of anger from that. They're like, "You don't love the sport of bodybuilding." I'm like, "I do." It's like, and do you know who Alberto Nunez is?
Of course. Yep.
Me and Alberto Nunez kind of went on this crusade about how it needs to be a little bit different. We actually even started a Facebook page. This is like 10 years ago, called Natural Bodybuilding Show Day Reform, and we tagged everyone. And now a lot of natural shows are starting to do that. And I would like to see the NPC maybe jump on board, because NPC, they even have bigger turnout. So I think it would even benefit them more rather than keeping people there for hours and hours.
Well, you know what? Thank you, Cliff. I appreciate you doing that 10 years ago. Great,
Yeah.
man. It's great. Okay. So wrapping it up, what do you, I like to ask this question sometimes to people as we close things out. Cliff, what do you feel like bodybuilding has taught you? Or what do you feel like bodybuilding has given you?
Oh man, bodybuilding has given me so much. Some of my best friends I met through bodybuilding. My one friend Mikey, he started out as a client, and just over time we were like, man, we get along. And another one from Austria, his name is Valentin, and we've gotten to be good friends. We visit each other. I've flown to Austria. He's come here and stayed at my house, and I'm like, man, 50 years ago that wouldn't have even been possible. But man, bodybuilding has really taught me a much more linear correlation, because it's like, there's something that I always say is that, like, thinking of a good way to word this is that life has so much joy in it, but it's rarely given, right? Life will definitely hand you hardship and suffering, but it doesn't really just hand over joy. And bodybuilding is like a direct correlation in that the sport of bodybuilding doesn't hand you joy. You know what I mean? You're not handed the first place. You're not handed the physique changes. But if you work towards it, there is joy derived from the sport. And I think it works completely that way in life too. If you expect life or bodybuilding to just hand over joy to you, it's not coming. It will hand hardship, right? Anybody can get on stage and get last place and be embarrassed about the way they look. So you have to work for the joy that you seek.
Excellent, man. Okay, kind of the last question here, and then I'm going to kind of give you the final time here just to kind of share any final thoughts, words, shout out, stuff like that. Now, in terms of the future, in terms of the coaching business, you said you have a little investment stuff on the side, some real estate stuff. What do you have a long-term vision for yourself in terms of business and how you want to be living out your life, let's say in 10, 15, 20 years? I know it's hard to think that far ahead, but I think most of us, we have some sort of thoughts into the future because it's healthy and you have to, right? What are your thoughts in terms of where you'd like to be 10, 15, 20 years, if you've thought about that, on some level?
Well, so with the investing business, I don't really do a lot with it. It's pretty much self-sustaining. I just, I shuttle stuff in there every once in a while, and I have somebody that helps me take care of my real estate stuff. And I set that up so I don't have to do much with it, if that makes sense. And so it allows me to focus nearly all my time on this. Um, with my coaching, I plan to continue to improve myself and try to attract good people that want to accomplish big things on stage. I kind of view that as the core of my work life, right? My clients. It's where I make most of my income from, and it's where I enjoy most of it. And then I reserve some side areas where I do things that I find interesting, writing a book on a topic that I find interesting. I'm creating a course right now with the help of some people, and that's interesting to me. This may sound really crazy, but I'm usually not a big long-term planner. The reason being that I find that the longer into the future I plan, the more I'm trying to predict the future, because it's usually contingent on this happening or that happening. I usually will do something that I do, finish it, and then I pick my head up and I say, what's the next best opportunity in front of me? And honestly, I've lived my whole life that way. I do something, I give it my all, and then I finish it, and I pick my head up and say, where do I go from here? And then I choose a path and I go from there. And I don't really, I don't try to coordinate too far down the road. I know that sounds I know it sounds crazy to most people.
I it's wise words, man. I love it. It's great. We're all different. We all have different perspectives. Okay. Before I do a quick outro here, Cliff, any final thoughts, any final words, any shout outs? If people want to check out the complete contest preparation handbook in terms of bodybuilding, where can they find that? I found it to be a very helpful resource. So the floor is yours, and then I'll do a quick outro, and that'll be a wrap.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you want to find my book, it's on my website, teamwilsonbb.com. And mostly, man, I just want to say thank you to everybody in the sport of bodybuilding, because, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my future. And now I have an amazing job, and, you know, it supports my family. And then to top it all off, I had some health issues the past few years where, you know, I was kind of out of the spotlight for a little while. I wasn't like posting as much. I wasn't able to go to shows. And I kind of was afraid that my business would shrink in that period of time because of the health issues. But not only didn't it, I mean, I had people I didn't even know sending me messages and saying, you know, are you all right? You haven't posted in a while, you know, and man, the amount of support that I've gotten from people is absolutely incredible. And so, man, I just want to thank everybody that's ever given me that support, because I get to do what I love for that reason. So that's all I really need to say.
Perfect, man. Now, if somebody watching or listening to this, Cliff, does want to inquire about your coaching services, I'm assuming just go to your website and they can find all the info there. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just teamwilsonbb.com, and there's an application on there. And like I said, my fiance Haley will get back to you, and she'll be asking you all the questions that I would probably be asking you.
So make sure you're kind to her, because if you're not, then you're going to maybe be out of luck in terms of getting coached by Cliff, right?
Yeah. You know, when somebody's really good, Haley comes to me and goes, I got a great guy for you. You're going to love this guy. So Haley, you want to get on Haley's good side.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Cliff, I appreciate your time, man. It was a great conversation. Learned a lot. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate having me on.
For sure. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. As you guys know, I always like to say, if it wasn't for all of you watching and listening to the podcast would not exist. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Before we end this awesome conversation with Cliff today, if you guys would do two quick things for me, please. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't done so already. That's really important, because I release all of these episodes first on YouTube, and then I'll distribute them to iTunes, Castbox, and some of the other major podcast platforms. And the other favor I have for all of you, make sure you take this episode with Cliff, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Cliff, tag Behind the Muscle. That's really important to me. Just to know that, hey, you guys found great value in this specific conversation today. And it's an awesome way. It's a great way. It's an easy way for other people that haven't heard about Behind the Muscle podcast to find it. They're going to subscribe. They're going to listen. and they're going to be positively impacted. And that's really the desire of my heart. My focus with this podcast is to bring on elite athletes, elite coaches, have them share their stories so that people are going to watch, they're going to listen, and then they themselves will be positively impacted through these coaches and athletes' stories. And then finally, per the usual, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.